Somebody needs to explain to me how a man who built his entire second act on the phrase "real hip-hop isn't dead" just stood in the center of a Toronto stage while an entire Canadian venue looked through him like he was a smudge on the glass. And I don't mean the crowd was quiet. I mean the crowd treated Papoose the way you treat a restaurant that says walk-ins only. They simply kept walking with their eyes somewhere else. Because what got caught on camera in Canada is not a bad night. It is a diagnostic. And the diagnosis is that the version of Papoose the culture has been clapping for was never, at any point, standing on that stage alone. It was always leaning on the biggest, most undeniable name he ever attached himself to. I'm talking about Remy Ma. And before anybody types he's a legend, put some respect on it. I need you to sit inside the thing that actually happened, because what happened up north connects directly to a cease-and-desist letter, a diss record called W.Y.F.L, a claim that one person wrote 90% of somebody else's bars, and a boxing champion who is currently the only person on earth who can still see him. That is the layered mystery nobody has lined up yet. The silent arena and the legal letter are not two different stories. They are the same story running on parallel tracks. And when we get to the part where I break down why a grown MC ran to attorneys instead of running the stage back, you're going to understand that this Canada moment was never about Canada at all. The stakes here are not small. At the personal level, this is about what is left of a 2-decade career once you strip away the relationship that defined it. At the cultural level, this is about what hip-hop actually does with a lyricist who never converted respect into an audience. Does the culture keep pretending, or does it finally tell the truth? And at the systemic level, this is about a machine that spends years selling you the idea of a man, and then the first time the man has to sell himself without the machine's permission, the room goes silent. Because when we get past the jokes and the reels and the defenders typing they know him, they were listening keenly. The question that is going to sit in this whole thing is brutally simple. If the room was full of real hip-hop heads, then tell me which bars they were reciting back. I'll wait. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Let me rewind this properly, because there is a whole generation watching this clip that does not have the context. And without the context, you will end up in the worst possible place for this conversation, which is feeling sorry for somebody by accident. Papoose has been in this culture since the early 2000s, a Brooklyn MC known for intricate, syllable-dense, marathon-level penmanship. The kind of rapper whose whole reputation is built on the fact that writers and purists stamped him as underrated for 20 straight years. He first connected with Remy Ma back in 2004 through DJ K Slay, which is as old school New York as it gets. And from that moment, the story the public was sold was one of the industry's most airtight loyalty tales. Remy got arrested in 2007 for the shooting of Makeda Barnes-Joseph, got sentenced to 8 years the following year, and Papoose did the thing that turned him from good rapper into folk hero. He married her over the phone on May 12, 2008, while she was locked up and held her down the entire sentence. That is not nothing. That is a real, documented, genuinely romantic set of facts. And I say that on purpose because I want you to understand that this channel is not confused about what the man earned reputationally in that chapter. When she came home in 2014, they went on Love and Hip Hop. They renewed their vows in a big Winter Wonderland ceremony in December 2015. They had their daughter Reminisce Mackenzie in December 2018. And for a very long time the brand was Pap and Rem. The couple, the unit. The proof that loyalty still exists in a genre full of snake behavior. But here's the thing about building your public identity on a marriage. The moment the marriage cracks, the identity does not simply shrink, it caves inward, because the thing the audience was actually loyal to was the pairing, not necessarily the discography. And the pairing started cracking in 2022, when whispers about Remy and battle rapper Easy the Block Captain began floating, escalated by June of 2023, when reports surfaced of a physical altercation between Papoose and Easy at a Chrome 23 event, and then fully detonated in December of 2024 when both of them took the whole thing to the timelines, and Remy publicly accused Papoose of stepping out with boxing champion Claressa Shields. Papoose formally filed for divorce on May 22, 2025, alleging infidelity, and as of right now the divorce still is not finalized, which means every single thing happening in this story is happening inside an open wound, in public, for an audience that has already picked sides. That is the stake setup you actually need, because when you understand that the Canada show happened after all of that, after the split, after the filing, after both of them started publicly rewriting the history of who did what for whom, then the silent venue stops being an isolated embarrassment and starts being the first time in 2 decades that Papoose had to be Papoose with nothing attached to his name except his own catalog. What are the stakes? Musically, his entire legacy claim is lyrical elite. And a room full of people who cannot name one of your songs is the single most efficient way to have that claim publicly questioned. Culturally, he is now being positioned in direct opposition to Remy, who just turned the entire breakup into a record the culture is outright celebrating. And that contrast is brutal for him. Financially, a touring artist who cannot hold a room is a touring artist whose future booking price is dropping in real time, because promoters talk, and the footage is the receipt. And reputationally, this is the moment where underrated legend tips over into something sadder. The moment where the culture decides the reason you were underrated was maybe not that the world was sleeping on you, but that the world had already heard enough and made its choice. I am telling you right now, none of this is about what happened in one province. This is about the end of a protected era. And we're going to walk through exactly what the footage shows, because the footage is the only thing in this entire situation that does not lie. Now let me put on my calm, evidence-first voice and actually look at what we can verify, because I refuse to let this video become another reaction by vibe situation. The first piece of surface evidence is the concert clip itself, the one that has been circulating as Papoose crash out during his performance in Canada, with a crying laughing caption and the tomato emoji. And I want you to actually watch what is in the frame rather than what the meme says is in the frame. You see Papoose on stage, you see him going through the motion of performing, and then the camera swings to the crowd and the energy is flat to the point of being instructional. Pockets of the room not moving, hands not raised, phones not up, that particular kind of stillness that is not respectful listening, but the other thing. The polite version of nobody knowing the record. There is a specific moment in the circulating footage where you can practically hear the room swallow. And the commentary on it has been merciless, the line that keeps getting quoted being some variation of "they don't know the words to none of your songs," and it's crickets out there. That is the surface. That is verifiable in the sense that the clip exists, it is real, and it is doing exactly the numbers you think it is doing, because humiliation travels faster than talent, and everybody knows it. Now here is the second piece of surface evidence, and this is where it gets interesting. Papoose's own response, which is not apology and not silence, it is content. He posted his own flicks from the show in Toronto with a caption hyping the deluxe version of his Bars on Wheels album, which is the classic move. You cannot argue with the footage, so you ignore the footage and post the angles that make it look like a moment. I am not even calling that dishonest. I am calling it a tell, because an artist who had actually walked off a stage with the room in his hand would let the room tell the story, and the fact that he had to narrate it himself tells you the room did not cooperate. The third piece of evidence is the counter-narrative that started forming immediately. The Instagram reel with the caption about how it takes a real one to come to Canada, get on stage, drop bars, and the people listening keenly, insisting that the crowd knew exactly who Papoose was and was simply locked in like a masterclass audience. And I want to be fair here, I genuinely do. Because there is a real version of that defense. We have all seen him murder a set on the radar radio where the room is sitting forward like students in a lecture hall. Because on the radar is a radio format where people show up specifically to dissect bars. And in that controlled environment, Papoose has absolutely done his job. But a radio set is not a concert, and the difference matters, because at On the Radar the audience came pre-sold on "We are here to study penmanship," whereas a general audience in a Canadian venue is the truest stress test there is. The one where you have to convert somebody who did not show up for you specifically. The fourth piece of evidence, and honestly the most damning because it is a pattern, is the way this entire thing was framed the moment it broke, not as Papoose had an off night, but through the specific, rehearsed joke structure about invisibility. The Papsies bit comparing him to a ghost in a Patrick Swayze movie, where only one person in the building can even perceive him. That joke did not come out of nowhere. It came out of the footage. It came out of the fact that when you watch him up there is a sense that he is performing to a room that is not actually receiving him. And comedy always works best when it is pointing at something true. So what do these four pieces add up to? They add up to this. The clip is real. The defense is a format switcheroo. The self-narration is a tell. And the punchline was inevitable because the culture had already been primed by months of Papoose losing narratives to read this exact footage in the cruelest possible way. Does everybody understand how crazy that actually is? The man did not trip on stage, he did not forget a lyric, he did not do anything technically wrong. And the culture still processed it as a collapse, because the collapse was never going to be in the performance. The collapse was always going to be in the gap between the performance and the room. And that gap is about to widen in ways even the people making the memes have not connected yet. And oh, do I have more for you? Because everything I just showed you, the dead room, the self-congratulating caption, the "they were listening keenly" cope, the ghost joke, all of it is the appetizer, the part of the story that lives on the surface where anybody can see it. What is coming next lives a layer deeper, in the reactions and the receipts and the things people thought were separate news items, when they are actually pieces of the exact same machine. Because here is the part the stop hating on Papoose crowd does not want us to get to. And I say that with full respect for the fact that some of you are in this comment section right now ready to type, "He held her down while she was in prison," like that is a coupon that never expires. If you are one of those people, stay with me, because you are actually the exact person I want in the room for the next section. Not because I am trying to change your mind in 2 minutes, but because what I am about to show you is going to force you to sit with a question your hero does not want to answer. Can we have the real conversation now? Good. Because the cultural evidence is where the story stops being a concert review and starts being a full-blown civil war over credit, authorship, and who actually built the career that is now standing in an empty-looking venue pretending everything is fine. Here is the first piece of cultural evidence, and it is the earthquake under everything. Remy Ma's record W.Y.F.L, which stands for Why You Fucking Lying, released on April 10th of this year, right in the middle of the divorce chaos. And it is not a subliminal. The bars everybody clipped are aimed directly at Papoose's loudest claim in this whole saga. The claim he made on Instagram Live, where he said he wrote 90% of the rhymes that came out of Remy's mouth, including, and this is the part that sent the internet into orbit, that he wrote conceded, her 2006 smash. She answered it in the song with a verse that goes, and I am quoting the reported lyrics here. The nerve of N******, as claiming they wrote those hits / when they whole career they ain't never ghost wrote shit / not for me, or anybody else / you always act like you helped the N******, A. Go help yourself. And, if you know anything about this man's public moves over the last several months, that line is not random aggression. It is surgically aimed at the exact thing he has been doing, running around positioning himself as the invisible hand behind somebody else's catalog, while, per the wider commentary around him, apparently never having the receipts to make it stick. Now, second piece of cultural evidence, and this is where the culture has picked a side, claim becomes undeniable. The cosigns on Remy's record. Fat Joe, her own day one, a man who has known both of these people forever, posted the record and wrote Jesus Christ at Remy Ma is back, and the comment firestorm under every posting included Memphis Bleak, Murder Mook, Mia X, and Millas all lighting it up. That is not a fan reaction. That is industry. That is peers. That is the very ecosystem of real hip-hop heads the Papoose defense claimed were sitting in Canada, listening keenly. And they were all busy celebrating Remy's clapback instead of defending Papoose's pen. Third piece of cultural evidence, the counter-argument I have to honor before I dismantle it. Claressa Shields going on the Ariel Helwani show and refusing to name Remy Ma among her favorite women in hip-hop, saying, quote, I don't know many of her songs. And I want to give the other side its full due here, because on the surface that looks like a clean body bag win for Papoose's camp. His new partner, a 3-division world champion boxer, 2-time Olympian, undisputed champ. The woman literally nicknamed the GWAT, going on camera to say Remy Ma is irrelevant to her. But watch what that actually reveals when you strip the bravado off it, because it reveals the exact thesis of this entire video. Claressa Shields is the only person in this equation who can still see Papoose the way the culture saw him for 20 years. As this overlooked genius, this legend who never got his flowers. And she can only see it because she did not grow up inside the hip-hop machine that has spent 2 decades quietly deciding otherwise. She walked into it in 2024 at a Shakur Stevenson fight, fell for the man himself, and has been fiercely loyal ever since. Her inability to name a Remy Ma song is not proof that Remy is irrelevant. It is proof that Shields is the lone believer left in a room that has gone quiet, which is, I'm sorry, the most on-the-nose real-life echo of the Papoose joke that you could possibly have written if you tried. The fourth piece of cultural evidence is the engagement announcement, because yes, she has reportedly said they are planning a future together. There are reports they are engaged. There is talk of starting a family in 2026, and Papoose has been out here calling her my diamond, while the legal marriage to Remy still has not been dissolved. And the culture's reaction to that is not, love wins. The culture's reaction is a raised eyebrow and a wait he's still legally married, which means even the thing that should be his redemption arc, the boxer who sees him, the new start, is getting processed through the exact same skeptical filter that is now permanently glued to everything he does. So connect those 4 dots for a second. Remy turned the ghostwriting accusation into a certified record. The industry's real heads blessed it. The one person defending Papoose is someone outside hip-hop's history who has to perform a version of I don't even know who Remy is to keep the narrative clean. And the engagement, which is supposed to be the feel-good reset, just became another thread in the public divorce. This is not both sides. I'm not pretending this is equal. What I am showing you is that every piece of cultural energy in this situation is flowing in one direction, toward Remy, and Papoose keeps trying to stop a river with a lawyer's letter. Which, by the way, brings us to the part where this story stops being gossip and starts being a full lesson in how the actual business of hip-hop eats its own history. We are about to shift gears hard, because the deepest layer here has nothing to do with who can rap better and everything to do with who owns what, who gets to claim what, and why the machine, not the crowd, the machine needed this story to end exactly the way it is ending. Alright, we have to change registers now, because this is the section that separates the reaction channels from an analyst channel. And I need you to lock in. Everything up to this point has been the visible layer, the stuff a casual scroll would show you. But the actual war happening underneath the Canada footage is a business war, a publishing war, and an attention economy war. And it has been running this whole time in 3 separate systems that all lead to the same ugly conclusion. The first system is authorship and publishing, and I need you to understand how catastrophic the 90% claim actually is to both of these people, regardless of who is telling the truth. In the music business, songwriting credit is literal money. Publishing splits, mechanical royalties, performance royalties, sync fees. And when you go in front of an audience and say, I wrote 90% of the rhymes that came out of her mouth, including conceited, what you are really saying is either, I am owed a share of a catalog I never collected on, in which case you are confessing to leaving generational wealth on the table for 2 decades, or, I am overstating my contribution for leverage during a divorce, in which case you have just handed the other side the exact thing they needed to litigate both authorship and character. There is no version of that claim that makes the person making it look strong. If it is true, he is a man who spent 20 years doing unpaid ghost work and only remembered to ask for credit when the marriage died. And that is a tragedy of self-inflicted economics. If it is false or inflated, he is attempting to rewrite the public record of a woman's career in real time while she still owns the pen and the mic. And the culture knows it, which is precisely why Remy did not just answer it on social media. She answered it in the format where legacy is actually decided. A record on a beat, with the industry's real heads nodding along. That is the game being played at a level most people miss. He fought a publishing dispute with a press narrative and a legal letter. She fought it with an actual piece of art that the culture immediately ratified. And in hip-hop, the piece of art always wins the historical argument. The second system is the attention economy itself. And this is the part that feels a little bit like looking behind the curtain at the wizard. Papoose's entire post-relationship public presence has been maintained not by a label machine or a hit record, but by a kind of engagement narcotic where his relevance is constantly being repriced by other people's memes. The Pap sees ghost, the dry begging complaints, the he looks like he's always owed money running joke. And here is the brutal truth about the attention economy. It will happily keep a person famous for being embarrassing, because embarrassment is the cheapest, highest volume content there is, but it will not build an audience for a person's music. Because the audience that shows up for the humiliation leaves the moment the humiliation is not on screen. The Canada clip is the purest expression of this. The clip popped, it did numbers, it got more eyes on Papoose than any of his actual records have in years. And every single one of those eyes was pointed at him as an object of entertainment, not as an artist. When you run a career on that fuel for long enough, the algorithm learns that your audience wants you to lose. And then the algorithm does exactly what it did. It serves the collapse clip to millions. It buries the he actually can rap context. And it turns a mid-concert into a national referendum on whether the man was ever worth anything. The machine that made him the loyal husband is the same machine that now needs him to be the washed rapper. Because the machine does not care about truth. It cares about continuity of engagement. And nothing drives engagement like watching a protected narrative get its protection stripped away on camera. The third system is legacy itself, the intangible currency that hip-hop is supposed to value above everything. And this is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Papoose has spent 20 years being called underrated, and I need somebody to finally do the accounting on what underrated actually means when you have had 2 decades, every cosign, a marriage to one of the biggest female MCs in history, and yet no one in a room full of rap fans can spontaneously recite one of your songs. Underrated was always supposed to be a runway, a temporary state that precedes the overdue moment where the world catches up. But at a certain point, still underrated after 20 years is not a status, it is a sentence. And what the Canada footage exposed is that the world was never going to catch up because the world was never actually listening to the music. It was listening to the story. The loyal man who held down his queen, the battle rap purist, the guy who deserves better because he played the game right. When the story got rewritten, When the marriage collapsed and the loyalty narrative was replaced by accusations and a boxing champion, there was no music underneath strong enough to hold a room on its own, and the silence in that venue was just the sound of the story running out. All three of these systems point the same direction, and I have been dancing around the actual reveal long enough to make sure you have every single piece, because I genuinely believe the truth here is bigger and colder than an aging rapper had a bad show. Here it is. Let me say the thing out loud that this entire video has been driving toward, and I'm going to say it slowly because it deserves the weight. The Canada flop was never the real story, and it was never even really about Canada. The real story, the truth bomb that the memes keep circling without landing on, is that Papoose spent his entire career outsourcing his relevance to other people's narratives, and the moment every one of those narratives was withdrawn at once, what remained on stage was a man performing to a room that had never formed a direct relationship with him, only with the idea of him. Think about the architecture of his public life for 1 second. The loyalty story belonged to Remy's prison sentence. His legend, status, was borrowed from the respect of writers and purists. His second act relevance was borrowed from a world champion boxer who walked in and became the only person left who could see him as a hero. His I wrote 90% claim was borrowed from somebody else's catalog. And even his current headlines are borrowed from a diss track that somebody else wrote and performed. Every single pillar was load-bearing on a woman. First Remy held up the marriage. Then Shields held up the resurrection. And the Canada show was the first time the man had to stand there with zero borrowed weight. And the silence was the sound of the borrowed weight hitting the ground. I want to be extremely precise with my language here, because I am not saying Papoose cannot rap. That would be false. And I am not saying he was never important. That would also be false. What I am saying, with maximum conviction, is that the formula he ran for 2 decades, be respected, not heard, be loyal, not undeniable, be the backstory, not the main event, has a catastrophic expiration flaw. Because backstories only have value while the main event is still on the board. The main event of his life was Remy Ma's career. And when that main event divorced him, he did not suddenly have his own main event waiting in the wings. He had a bag of battle bars and a legal pad full of cease-and-desist language. The WYFL letter is the smoking gun that proves the whole thesis. And I need you to see why. He did not answer a diss record with a diss record, which is what a full self-contained artist does. He answered it with attorneys, specifically a cease and desist from his lawyer Shelley Albert to Remy's lawyer, claiming the song is profane, insulting, and highly negative remarks, and reportedly warning that he might amend filings to pursue a defamation claim and legal fees. A defamation claim over a diss track, in a genre whose entire foundational language is the diss track. And if that does not tell you everything about the difference between the two people at the center of this story, I don't know what could. Because one of them turned a breakup into a record that Fat Joe blessed, and the other turned a record into a legal filing that the entire culture immediately turned into another punchline. The consequences of this are real, and they are already in motion. For him, personally, the ceiling has fundamentally lowered in a way that has nothing to do with his skill. Promoters have the footage, the algorithm has the footage, and the culture has decided the story. Which means every future stage is now a smaller, more skeptical version of that Toronto room, unless he somehow reverse engineers 2 decades of borrowed relevance back into direct, owned relevance. Culturally, he has become the living warning sign for a generation of artists who think being respected is the same thing as being retained, the lesson being that respect without an audience is a museum piece, and the museum does not pay your booking fee. Systemically, this whole saga is a masterclass in how hip-hop's attention machine manufactures a fall. It spends years inflating a person's brand off a non-musical narrative. Then it monetizes the deflation of that brand off the exact same narrative. And the artist in the middle never once sat down and asked himself what would still be left in the room if every narrative was suddenly turned off. The room told him. The room was the answer. And that is the cold, uncomfortable, undeniable truth at the center of all of this. Nothing about the silence was an accident. It was an audit. And the audit revealed that the quiet was the only honest thing in the building. And now we land the plane the way the culture actually wants it landed, because I do not do nihilism on this channel. And I do not let a story this layered end in a shrug. The right person is still winning here, and that person is Remy Ma. And I want to be very specific about why it is not just Team Remy bias, it is pattern. Remy Ma, full stop, is the one who did the thing that separates a protected artist from an undeniable one. She let the work fight the war. When her ex went on a live and claimed he had written 90% of her rhymes, including conceited, she did not run to a lawyer's office to make somebody take it down. She walked into a booth and made WYFL. And then she walked onto Angie Martinez's summer barbecue stage on August 2nd at Coney Island and name-dropped him to his face in front of a live crowd. The reported line landing as, "You always acting like you help Pap and ****A. Go help yourself." That is not pettiness flailing. That is a woman who still owns her live show so completely that she can weaponize a divorce in real time and turn the whole thing into a festival moment while the person she is aiming at can only watch from behind a lawyer's stationery. Now watch the contrast one-liner because it crystallizes the entire video in a single sentence. While Papoose was in Toronto, standing in front of a room that did not know his songs, Remy Ma was in Brooklyn, standing in front of a room that knew her songs, so well she could rewrite a lyric on the spot and have the culture clip it as a victory lap. Rewind the tape on the key moments and reframe every single one through the lens of who ended up where. The ghostwriting accusation that was supposed to diminish her, it became the fuel for her biggest viral moment since the breakup. The cease and desist that was supposed to silence her, it became proof that her pen was drawing blood. Because you do not send lawyers after something that is not landing. The boxer who was supposed to make her irrelevant by not knowing her songs, that just clarified that the only person in the room who cannot name a Remy Ma record is someone who arrived to hip-hop in 2024 as an outsider, while the actual gatekeepers, Fat Joe, Memph Bleak, Murda Mook, were all in her corner lighting the thing up. Every single attack that was aimed at her turned into an asset. And that is what unfazed looks like. That is what rising without even needing to fight dirty looks like. And that is what it means to have a foundation so solid that every attempt to chip at it just bounces back as free promotion. This is the part where I give you the satisfying confirmation you came for. The culture is course correcting in real time. For years the narrative was Papoose is the loyal underrated genius who deserves better, and Remy is the beneficiary of his loyalty. And that narrative has now fully inverted not because of a propaganda campaign, but because one of them kept producing receipts on stage and the other kept producing documents in court. Things are going to be fine. Remy is in the most culturally potent position she has been in for years. The record is ratified. The machine is on her side right now, and the evidence speaks for itself so loudly that she does not even have to argue anymore. The right person is not just winning. The right person already won, in her own voice, on her own stage, in front of a room that knew every word. But understand something. This is only the start, and I do not say that as a vague hype line. I say it because there are concrete moving pieces in this story that have not landed yet, and you're going to want to be in this seat when they do. Number 1. The divorce is still not finalized, and the cease-and-desist letter explicitly waived a potential defamation claim and legal fees, which means what started as a diss track could very realistically turn into an actual courtroom chapter, a public discovery process where the 90% claim and the question of who wrote what would stop being a bar and start being a sworn statement. And if you think the culture is eating this up now, wait until there are actual filings being screenshot and dissected. Number 2, Remy has clearly identified W.Y.F.L and this entire victory arc as a reset, and she is sitting on more momentum than she has had in a decade, which means the next record, the next announcement, the next power move is going to land on a culture that has already pre-decided she is the protagonist. And I do not want you to miss the specific reveal when it drops, because it is going to tell us whether this is just a revenge chapter or the beginning of a full second era. And number 3, the Shields and Papoose engagement is out there while he is still legally married, which is a storyline that is going to detonate one way or another the moment either a wedding date gets announced or a judge makes a ruling. And whichever way it breaks, it is going to add an entire new floor to this saga. So here is my ask, and it is not a robot outro. It is genuinely the only responsible thing to say given everything I just laid out. If you want to be there for the filings, the follow-up records, and the inevitable next collapse, the way to guarantee you do not miss it is to hit subscribe right now, because this is exactly the kind of multi-chapter story that rewards the people who were early. And if you made it this far, if you actually sat through the full 20+ minutes instead of just grabbing the clip and running, you are the exact kind of viewer this channel exists for, and I appreciate you. Now before you go, here is the next one you want to click, and I'm going to sell it to you the only way I know how. There is a name attached to this entire breakup that everybody has been treating like a background character, when he might actually be the trigger for the whole war. And if you look at the date of the first public fracture and the date one specific battle rapper walked into the picture, you're going to notice they line up in a way nobody has connected out loud yet. When I show you that timeline, and I promise you we are going there, you're going to understand that the Canada moment and the WYFL moment were both aftershocks of an original explosion that happened before the cameras even got there. Do not just take the clip. Take the whole case. It is already loaded. The next video is the one that actually pulls the trigger, and you are going to want to be subscribed when it drops.